Hi, AP people. Welcome back. We're in our second module now. So today we're looking at how did Native Americans harness and use their environment prior to European discovery. So we're still looking at geography, but now we're bringing the Native Americans in. And we're going to take a look at life in the Americas prior to Columbus discovering it. So this is before the Europeans. Um, so our focus question today is how can we classify the accomplishments of Native Americans prior to Columbus? Okay? A couple of things I want to stress here. Oh, let's get rid of this. Okay. And okay. So, two things I want to stress right here. Okay? First thing is this prior to Columbus. That question is giving you a time frame. And in AP, when we look at these things, time frames are important. So whenever you get a question, there's going to be some kind of a time frame in it. You have to pay attention to that time frame because that time frame is going to guide you, and if you deviate from that time frame, if you bring in something outside of that time, then you're going to be basically, you can't be graded on that. So we got to look at that. Anytime there's some kind of benchmark or something like that, that has to put our minds in something. So this is before Columbus got to the Americas. What were the Native Americans doing and what were they accomplishing? Okay, so we're going to take a look at that, and we're going to kind of break it down today. So Native Americans. We're talking about what Columbus erroneously called Indians. He called them Indians because, of course, he thought he landed in India. It's a misnomer. Now we call them Native Americans, but that's kind of a catch-all tribe. There are going to be a lot of different kinds of people living in the Americas, and their lifestyles are going to vary differently based on where they live. So we have a map here of what is today the continental United States, and this is highlighting different language groups. And we can see in the colors on the map just all the different tribal influences. Okay, so we're where we are in New York City today. This is kind of Algonquin, Delaware territory. And in upstate New York, that's kind of what is that's kind of Iroquois territory. There's Cherokee down here, by where Georgia was, Chickasaw in Alabama. You have the Sioux up here in the Midwest, the Winnebago and the Powhatan over here, and they almost stretched into Virginia. Then you got Apache, Navajo, Cheyenne, Blackfoot, Nez Perce. So there's a lot of different groups, and just like if we go from one place to another today where people are different, it was the same back then, probably even more so. If somebody was an Iroquois, then they weren't the same as somebody who was a Navajo. That's kind of like saying that somebody is French is the same as somebody who's Russian or somebody who's Iraqi. We're talking about different people. They live on the same continent, but the languages are going to be different, the ways of life are going to be different, and the environment's going to be different. So diverse climates, thousands of different tribes. And geography is going to kind of be the one thing that's going to be the big barrier for people, as we're going to see. So historians estimate that by the time Columbus got here, we had between 50 and 100 million people living in the Americas. And there were about 2,000 different languages spoken. So a lot of different, very diverse people. This is not going to be an empty continent for Europeans to come and just plot down on. Pardon me. Sorry about that. Okay. So let's take a look at some of these Native American civilizations. Now, of course, we're not going to go into all of them. I mean, there's thousands of them, hundreds of millions of people. But we are going to take a look at some of the big accomplishments. So we'll look at the big Native American civilizations first. Now, we had a lot of the tribes in North America are going to be advanced, but nothing is going to be in comparison to what develops in Central and South America. Okay, since grade school, you've learned about the Maya, the Inca, and the Aztec. Well, let's focus in just a little bit. So, looking at Central and South America, those civilizations are going to develop to be much larger, partially because of climate. The growing conditions are a lot better in Central and South America. You have year-long growing conditions. It's hot. So the land is going to be extremely fertile. And the Mayan, who are today located in Central America, Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Belize, that kind of area, um, they were the first to develop like a very complex civilization. And one of the things that they developed that we still use today is maize, okay, which we call corn right here. So we eat a lot of corn today. Corn was not available before the Europeans got here, okay? So we want to keep that in mind. The Europeans are going to, the Mayan are going to be the ones that are going to develop corn. They're going to nurture it. Basically, it started out as a flower, it was inedible. And the Maya are going to develop this over several generations to be a crop that you could eat. And once it develops into a staple crop, it's the same staple crop that we have today, and it's going to be transformative once Europeans discover it, because it can grow in a lot of places. It's a very hardy crop, so it's not going to be susceptible to some of the other crops. And we can make a lot of things out of it, you know, from chips to popcorn to cornbread. There's a lot of different uses of corn, and corn is one of the big things that's in our diet. So the Maya are going to be able to develop a very complex civilization with pyramids that we still see today. At a time when Europeans weren't doing that. I mean, we're talking about, this is over 1,000 years ago, and they're developing complex cities with hundreds of thousands of people. And that's because they were able to domesticate corn. Now, the Mayas are going to be the first. Here's an example of this. Okay, this is in Tikal in Guatemala. This is the jungle. Okay, 1,000 years ago, they built a city with pyramids that went above the jungle canopy. Let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about savages living out in the woods. We're talking about people that are doing some very complex things. Not only are they able to domesticate a crop and to turn it into a staple that's going to feed hundreds of thousands of people, they're going to build gigantic cities. And they're building gigantic cities with gigantic pyramids. Stuff like this did not exist in Europe at that time. Okay? This is going to be very advanced. And they're doing this in the jungle. It is hot. They're doing this without iron tools. They did not have metalworking the way Europeans did. They did not have the wheel. And they were able to develop this. This is some advanced stuff here. Now, if you think that's a lot, then corn is going to spread, and other civilizations are going to develop it. Okay, so the Aztecs are going to take over from the Maya. The Maya are going to decline somewhere around 1100. And the Aztecs are going to come in afterwards, and they're going to create a mighty empire based on human sacrifice, which is going to get the Europeans kind of upset, but they're going to develop a gigantic empire as well. And again, that's because they're going to adopt corn from the Mayas. The Incas in Peru, and this is a picture of Machu Picchu, which is in Peru. Yes, that is a city on top of a mountain, which means that in order to build it, everything had to be brought up a mountain, and down, and up, and down. Yes, that's what they had to do. So if you had workers that are able to build something on top of a mountain, that's going to take a lot of food. Guess what kind of food they used? Corn. That's right. It spread from Central America into South America, and the Incan Empire is going to establish a gigantic empire. That is going to be extremely mighty. It's going to stretch basically throughout the Andes Mountains on the west coast of South America, from Peru all the way down to what is today Chile. It was huge, and they were able to build complex stuff like this. So, as we can see, the Native Americans are not going to be slouches. There's some, so this is going to be, this is a map of where the Incan Empire stretched to. We're talking thousands of miles here. Okay, this is Peru, down to Chile, and this is in the mountains. Now, of course, mountains is not the best farming, so as we remember from Global, they adapted to their land, and this is terrace farming. Okay, it's where they actually shore up and carve into the side of the mountains to create steps to produce additional farmland. Again, they did this without metal tools. They did not have them. They did this without the wheel. This was brute human force. But they were able to do it because they had corn. Now, the Central and South American tribes that we've heard about weren't the only advanced ones. In North America, there are going to be several tribes that are going to be advanced as well. Take a look at this picture here. That's a city inside of the cliff of a mountain. I'll let that sink in again. This is a city inside the cliff of a mountain. This was built by the people that we call the Anasazi, or the ancient Puebloan people. They're in the Four Corners region today. They're what we would call the Four Corners region today. So Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Nevada, in the American Southwest. They built these communities inside of mountains in the desert. They were able to utilize basically extremely advanced drip farming techniques in order to grow corn, in order to live there. And we see that we know that they were trading with Central American civilizations. We found archaeological evidence that they had like parrot feathers and things like that, and parrots aren't found there, so they came from the south. So you have more advanced civilizations in inhospitable climates. In the desert, they're building cities inside the mountains and these are multi-structure. I mean, these are multi-story structures. So we have like 3- and 4-story buildings when Europeans were not doing that. London, when this was built, London was a community that was racked by the plague and infested with rats and vermin. Nobody wanted to live there. Okay, very advanced stuff. Okay, what about flatland, Mississippian? Okay, Mississippi watershed is some very flat land today. It's what we call the Great Plains, and it's called the Great Plains for a reason, because it's open land. Well, there were people there called the Cahokia, or the Cahokian people, and they developed another large civilization, and they were based on maize. And because the land was so flat, they wanted to differentiate themselves. So you see this mound. This is an earthen pyramid, okay? This was built without a wheel, without metal tools, basketful after basketful of dirt piled on top of one another to build a giant mountain. Okay? Advanced stuff. You know, people always want to show their superior to others, so the rulers would build these. Really advanced stuff. Again, corn is going to be able to do it, and that's going to allow people to live there. Let's talk about some other civilizations and some accomplishments that aren't like physical. We're not talking pyramids or cities inside of mountains or on top of mountains or anything like that. Let's talk about the Iroquois. So, the Iroquois are probably going to be the Iroquois are going to be a special case because of their government. Okay. Iroquois are located in what is today New York State. In New York State, like New York City, but even worse, it has different kind of weather. You know, we're not talking about Central and South America where we've got good farmland. The farmland is okay up here, but it's hilly and we have multiple growing seasons. So winter is always going to produce a challenge. You're going to have to put food away, and you're going to have to make sure that people are fed throughout the winter time. That's going to take some planning. That's going to take some development. The Iroquois are going to be able to do that. The Iroquois are going to be able to do that because they're going to develop a very elaborate structure of governance. They're going to develop a confederacy. This is a vocabulary word you need to know, a confederacy. So what's a confederacy? A confederacy is going to be an association of groups that join together for a purpose. So they're pretty much independent, but they all come together and come up with agreements on everybody together for themselves. So they have 6 tribes that make up the Iroquois. Okay, the Iroquois Confederation made up six different tribes. You have the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, the Seneca, and then later the Tuscarora come in down here. They were a transport tribe that came from further down south. They had a tribal council that met and made decisions for everybody. They would fight together, and they had military and political alliances. So, if you were a Mohawk, the decisions were, if it was only for Mohawk land and doing things like Mohawk, then the Confederacy wouldn't have a say on that. But if we're talking about, building an army to protect against our enemies, the Algonquins, then we're going to do that together. Okay? So they joined together on things that were beneficial, but they all still had kind of their own autonomy. All right, this is important. They were what we call a matrilineal society. Matrilineal and patrilineal are words that you'll need to know. Patrilineal, P, means of the line of the father. Okay? Most societies that we know of today are patrilineal. Okay? That means that inheritance is spread from father to son. So, boys are going to be important. And a lot of civilizations, men have been more important historically than women. Because men are seen as they're physically stronger, they can go make more money, they can help provide for women. There's even a tradition in European society where, to marry, if a man goes to marry a woman, it's traditional for the father's side of the family to give the groom what's called a dowry. Basically, it's a gift from the father of the bride to the groom to help provide for the daughter, because daughters were seen as a burden. And, oh, you're going to take care of my daughter now, so I don't have to take care of her. So here, let me bribe you to help take my daughter off of your hands. That's literally what a dowry is. It is a bribe from the father to the groom to say, here, take my daughter, please. Most societies and most civilizations have been like that. And as we're going to see, it's only in very recent history that women are going to start to get the same rights as men. Guess what? The Iroquois were not a patrilineal society. They were a matrilineal society. What does that mean? Well, boys, if you're going to go and get married, the wife is not moving in with you. You move in with her. You go and move in her family's longhouse. And this is what a longhouse is. A longhouse is a big house. And it's made like that because the community is going to be important. And entire extended families would live together in the same house. And basically, they're going to be giant and open. You didn't have your own room or anything like that. So men would go and live with the women. And yes, men were the warriors in this civilization, and the chiefs would be men. However, the women had political say, and it was the women who helped select the leaders. So this was a matrilineal society. This is an example of a society where women actually had some importance prior to Columbus. Now, we got to remember, there's a lot of thinking out there that when Columbus got here, the Native Americans were a whole bunch of savages running around in the woods chasing after animals. Okay? The Iroquois could have taught the Europeans a thing or two, not only about government, but also about how to treat people. Okay? They lived in these longhouses. It was all communal living. Everybody looked after everybody else. It wasn't that you had people that were rich and the poor. The only people that were respected and revered were the elders, the people who had been alive for a while, because they were seen as having knowledge that was able to help the community. Again, Iroquois, a people before Columbus got here, and we see very advanced stuff coming out of them. All right, lastly, let's talk about the actual agriculture themselves. Native American tribes, not only were the Mayan going to develop corn, or maize, out of basically a flour, but what they developed then after that is they're going to develop some very interesting and intricate ways of farming. Now, I'm not going to get too deeply into this, but we have to understand a thing or two about how farming is done. Okay, so we put the seeds in the soil, we water it, and we give it sunlight, and it grows, right? We know that. Well, soil has nutrients in it. And when you plant something in the soil, it is going to suck up the nutrients out of the soil. Now, you can plant, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but after a while, that continuous planting is going to deplete the soil of nutrients. And if you keep doing this over and over again, the soil is going to turn bad and it's not really going to produce anything. Now, it took them a long time in Europe to figure out what to do about this. They would basically just, continue working the land until it died and then go somewhere else. Well, after a while in Europe, they realized, okay, we're going to take our land and we're going to divide it up. So we'll do 1, 2, 3 fields. So this year I'm going to plant wheat here. I'm going to plant rye here. And this field over here, I'm not going to plant anything. We're going to leave that open so that the soil will have a chance to recharge. And then the next year, we're going to rotate it. So this field will be empty, wheat here, rye here. That was known as crop rotation. That would let the soil recharge so that it would maintain its nutrients and it wouldn't get all sucked up. It took Europeans a long time to realize that. Native Americans didn't do that. You have to think about that. Even though that's an advancement for Europeans, 1/3 of the farm fields are lying fallow. That means they're not maximizing the amount of food they can produce. Native Americans developed what was called three-sister agriculture. Okay? So they would plant corn. That's the primary staple crop. But then they would also plant squash, like zucchinis, near the roots. And basically what that would do is that would put more nutrients into the soil, and that would help the corn grow. It's fertilizing the corn. And then, next to it, they would plant beans. Okay, so squash there, corn here, beans here. And the beans would take out bad nutrients and put more good nutrients into the soil. So the soil is constantly being recharged. And on top of that, we're not just making one kind of crop, we're now making 3. So Native Americans are going to be advancing what they're producing here. All right, really interesting stuff. So take a look here. Okay, everything that we've just looked at is the Native Americans before Columbus. I want you to think about, okay, how did they use their environment? How were they able to adapt to the environmental conditions that they had? What were some accomplishments that they had that showed that they are advanced people and not just like some naked savages running through the woods, which is sometimes the way that Native Americans are thought of? That is a very racist and European-centric way of thinking, and we have to get away from that kind of thinking. Okay, so how can we see that they are advanced? What kind of accomplishments do they have before Columbus gets there? That's your homework question. I want you to come in tomorrow with this answered with some details. Remember, this is AP, so we need to have at least 3 details to be able to explain it. Okay? And we're going to do our discussion tomorrow based on this, and then we're going to look at some primary sources to see what the Europeans thought of the Native Americans when they got here. All right, AP people, thank you again. That's a great module. I look forward to seeing you in class next time. Do your homework. If you have any questions, concerns, anything like that, remember my email is open to you. Hit me up anytime. I got you. Don't hit me up at midnight and expect an answer before school goes. It does not happen like that. But you know how it goes. All right, so have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you in class.